Talking about the Cup Series at Sonoma real quick. When you're looking back, first off, when you're looking at road courses, I just look at them all in kind of general, as a whole, not necessarily one road course over the other, but specifically at Sonoma, because Sonoma, we have seen certain trends happen more at that track versus other tracks, and I want to go into why those are the case and why they're not the case. And so when we're looking at Sonoma, anything 2016 and before, we can't look at, okay? It's not usable. Stages changed road course racing and the way that those races played out. And so anything before stages we can't look at. And then, with a little asterisk by that, we also have to look at the two races following the introduction of stages and then the last two Sonoma races in their own light to understand what was going on, which, for those of you that don't know, we are not running the carousel this week at Sonoma, thank God, because first off, that's just stupid. Anybody's like, we need to go back to the old days using the carousel. That was blinded by nostalgia. I was never pushing that because it was a terrible aspect of the track. You basically just force the field to get separated right off the bat. There's no passing sections in the carousel. So when we're looking at the last two races that ran the carousel, and we look at the distance and the amount, in terms of fantasy points, and in terms of looking at this from a fantasy perspective, the last two races were anomalies. We can't use those anymore, in my honest opinion, because one, the race was only 90 laps because the track was extended to nearly being 2.5 miles. And yeah, it was right at 2.5 miles. And now we're going back to 110 laps. Okay, so that's one aspect of more fast laps, more laps led to be out there. Not a gigantic amount, but more than we need to consider when we're building lines. And two, due to the carousel, look back. This ain't just me watching. This ain't just me talking. This is me watching, going back. Look for yourself. The carousel separated the field more. Anytime you get more slow-paced corners, it causes the field to spread out. Okay, anytime we enter those quick succession corner, and specifically going from a slow corner to a fast, long left-handed turn, then back down to a slow right-handed turn, that separates the field. Okay, and so the leaders will be able to gain a big, chunk of the lead, not gain a big chunk of the lead, but they were able to not only keep the lead, but extend it specifically in that area. Okay, if you were fast in the carousel, you were the lap leader. And so when we look back at the last couple races here, the last two, for example, with the carousel, when we look at lap leaders, it's been one. The last two races here, it was Truex leading 59 laps and Larson leading 57. Where did these guys start from? Okay, Larson started first. That's when Larson was just showing an absolute crazy amount of speed last year in practice in the Gen 6 car at this track starting first. It was, given that it would be him or Elliott. Both those guys were the two guys who led laps in this race. Clearly you had, William Byron, who got wrecked late in the race in 2021. And the reason I'm not talking about the reason I'm not really wanting to talk a lot about the race last year is due to the fact that it turned into a complete wreckfest. In the last two stages, all we did were just wreck the field. And so in terms of trying to, and certainly in stage 3, in terms of trying to analyze what teams are going to do, or in terms of looking at what certain teams, did, it just turned to a wreckfest. So none of that, matured. Any strategy decisions made early in the race from guys deep in the field. It's not... When we're looking at strategies at these races and looking back at them, we're trying to project who the value plays are going to be. Who are the guys that are going to be, being forced in the optimal line once you already figure out who the lap leader is going to be. We can't find that from last year's race, turning into a complete wreckfest. We can, however, still look at, the carousel caused one guy to lead the race. And the fact is, due to these stages changing the racing at Sonoma, you pit 2 laps before the end of the stage at Sonoma. That's just how it is, okay? And depending on where you are in relative towards the leader dictates how late you can wait in the stage to pit. If you're deep in the field, you have to pit with 3 to go. If you're the leader or right behind the leader, you got till 2 to go. You got until the leader crosses the start-finish line. That is in pit road. You can make the entrance in the pit road with 2 to go as long as the leader hasn't gotten there. So you're typically seeing the top 10 guys who are choosing this race in long terms and racing for the end of the race to pit along with the leader with 2 to go. Everybody else is going to be forced to pit with 3 to go just because they're not close enough to maintain or not get penalized by pitting with 1 to go in the stage anywhere from really 9th on back. And usually, if you don't pit there, you're just going for the stage winning. So normally, how I look at these guys, just speaking real quick, the first 8 guys are going to be pitting at the end of the stage. The guy who is going, in my honest opinion, the guy who is in the best course of action to get guaranteed laps led, which I think would probably be about 5 under yellow, is going to be anybody running from 8th to around 12th, because they can move up, win the stage, lead under yellow, and then they'll give the lead back to the leader. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because when you look back to 2 races with the carousel, one, these races went green. There was like no passing. Not put no passing. Like in 2019, the race went green. There was no yellows in the race. Clearly, there were spinouts. Clearly, there were stages. But the race went green the entire time. Nobody led laps outside of Truex and William Byron. And where William Byron led was early in the race, just due to the fact that he started up front. But past that, it was the guy with the best car who necessarily didn't get the pole position, but he started up there. Truex, fastest car, showing he's going to have speed in 2019. Larson happens to start first, shows speed, leads the races. So the races that I want to look at specifically are 2018 and 2017, and we'll get back to the picks in a second. We're just trying to summarize the last couple races to give you context of what you're looking at when you're just diving into whether it be our spreadsheet or other spreadsheets, and you're seeing that there's such a discrepancy, and this is a case where I guess we have to play tricks. Which, secondly, real quick, I have a pit video coming out. I was going to make it this week, but I'm going to push it to next week, just due to the fact that next week's basically an off week with just the Knoxville race. I can throw out some more stuff out there that necessarily won't sway people one way or the other. That was my main concern by really talking about pit data this last week. However, the one thing that we did see from that, the one thing that we saw, whether it be in a live show or later when we dove into it more in my Discord, is that, Truex Jr., Martin Truex Jr. is going to lead some laps at Gateway. You should play some Martin Truex Jr., And for the 3rd time in a row this year, the JGR driver, who is the lowest owned, not only of the JGR cars, but of all the potential lap leaders, including $9,000 guys, $8,000 guys, $10,000 guys, is just not even owned. Unbelievable. We got Denny Hamlin, under 15 at Dover. We got Kyle Busch. I think he's around 11 at I think he was around 11 at Darlington. Martin Truex Jr., 8% owned? What the fuck are you guys doing? Why are people not... What is going on here? I mean, Grant, I was heavy on Briscoe and stuff, but I always, spread ownership out, and I'm always over. There's no reason Truex Jr. should be that low owned. That makes no sense. Well, Brandon, he's washed up. I agree with you, but when we find data points that show that I felt very confident in Truex leading last week, why is nobody else playing these guys? I don't understand what we're doing with our lineups. Why are we having so many guys low owned this year that are potential lap leaders that are legit? Not this is a situation where this could happen. No, we're seeing data points where these guys are going to get laps and they're just not owned. I have no idea what we're doing. So when we get to Truex this weekend, it's going to be, we're going to hear it. As I said, I don't listen to content anymore, but we're going to hear it. Well, Truex is pretty good at Sonoma, and he led laps last week. He came out of nowhere, led laps last week out of nowhere. That was not out of nowhere. That was pit road. That was his pit stall selection, which is what the video is on next week. Really diving into that stuff. But do not bring in any of the fucking crap from Gateway to Sonoma when talking about Truex this week. I swear to God, if I hear anybody say, but Truex led laps last week at Sonoma, I'm going to absolutely lose it. Truex is most likely going to be chalk. I don't think Truex is going to show the speed that he showed in the practices for these races in the previous Sonoma years where Truex dominated. Because yes, Truex is very good at this track. And yes, I will have some Truex ownership if he shows me any sort of speed in this race. But what really got Truex the wins at Sonoma were strategy. When we look back at 2018, Truex, and it kind of sucks because the 47 got stalled midway through stage number 2. Actually, right at the start of stage number 2. So it kind of allowed people to, and I mean, fuel mileage isn't an issue at Sonoma anyway, but it gave a buffer that you didn't have to be as aggressive on pit strategy. And so when we look at stage 1, in 2018, Truex and all the leaders go into the pit road with 3 to go. And you're like, Brandon, that's kind of stupid. I mean, I have it right here on the screen. You can see everybody just diving down to pit road with this to go. And when we're looking, like I said, when we're looking at the gaps, when everybody starts to pit in stage 1 in 2018, it's Truex and Harvick separated by about a second and a half. Then it's AJ 8 seconds back, Boyer 12 seconds back, Keselowski 15, Johnson 17, Elliott 19, Hamlin 21, Larson 21 seconds back, McMurray 22 seconds back. And so the top 10 are the only guys who can pit with the nearly identical pit call as whatever the leader is going to be this weekend. And so I don't think we're going to see a lot of shuffling in the top 5 outside of the fact that we might have somebody who has the fastest car or has a really good car in practice start 5th or 6th. My main idea of approaching this race, because I want to nail the two, this is a 2 lap leader type of race. We're not chasing anything more than that. Okay, we have seen, and yes, when we're looking back at 2017, Truex had the best car, blew a motor late in the race, led 25 laps. If that doesn't happen, I think Truex leads around 50 laps in 2017. And so real argument made that there's going to be one main lap leader who will most likely be somebody who's starting in the top 3. In my opinion, it's most likely going to be the pole sitter, because not only are they going to have fast car practice, not only are they going to be the fastest car in their group, if they can back that up and actually be the fastest car to start in the pole, I don't see a reason to not play the pole sitter. I don't see a reason to not trust that guy is going to have that speed. When we're looking at the second lap leader, this is where I want to try and look at strategy, or try and look at who's going to be off sequence to take advantage of the situation where the leader isn't leading. Like, for example, Harvick led laps in the 2018 race, specifically when Truex wasn't leading. When Truex didn't have the lead just due to pit strategy, that's where it fell into Kevin Harvick's point of view. It was also a guy who was going to be running in top 10. It was also a guy who was most likely going to be running top 5 to be your 2 lap leaders. And so when we look at this weekend's race, who are the guys that pop out as going to be the fastest guys in this race? Going to be the guys competing for, that's the cup, or that's the truck folder. Going to be guys competing for the race win. I think first and foremost, AJ Allmendinger is going to be there. Big mistake for $8,800. I think that's a mistake just anywhere. But AJ is going to be up there. Elliott's going to be up there. Kyle Busch, Larson, Truex, and Chastain. Those are my 5 guys entering. I hope that's 5. It could be 6. Those are the main guys I'm looking at this weekend to be the main lap leader in this race. When we're looking at secondary lap leaders of guys that, because remember, due to the fact that these guys are going to be running around each other, it's hard for 2 of those 5 guys, in my opinion, to be the lap leader. I think one of those is the main lap leader, and then it goes to a secondary guy who's not necessarily racing right with them. Guys who are going to be fast, who can lead, but who aren't, right on the coattail of the leader because they're running the same strategy as them. The guys that then fall into that category for me are Blaney, Byron, Logano, and even people like Harvick, Cindric, Reddick. It's certainly, much more wide open, and we're going to have to look at practice data to get a better idea of that. But that's how I think it goes in terms of chasing lap leaders. I think AJ Allmendinger is a fantastic play. I think he's underpriced. I think he's going to be there. When we look back at AJ Allmendinger's performances at Sonoma, yes, he was in JTG Daugherty, which is a terrible name. I wish they would rename it. Secondly, he had to outdrive that equipment that he had. Okay, nearly every year we'd come to Sonoma, and we would, and the TV would focus on AJ, and we would see the struggles, and we would see the pressure the poor man would have to put on himself. And he choked most of the time. Sometimes the motor blew. Sometimes he made a mistake and lost a lot of positions late in the race. Sometimes the pit crew let him down in terms of strategy. There's a big old asterisk on all of AJ's previous races at Sonoma. And when you specifically look at his races at Sonoma, and then look at the recent races that he's running in good equipment, it is night and day, ladies and gentlemen. AJ Allmendinger is going to be here. The Collie car is way better than what he's had. And when you look at his recent races compared to what he used to do, he's right there. Sure, won the race at Indy, got a bit lucky. Okay, things got a bit crazy, but he was there all day. Road America ran into a problem last year. COTA had the best car, was going to win the race at COTA, got taken out. Absolutely obliterated for no reason. COTA, Daytona Road Course, we're looking at all these races. He got damage at the Roval last year. He's there. AJ Allmendinger is a top 3 car this weekend. That Collie car is going to be there. He's honestly my favorite to win the race and my favorite to lead laps. I think it's an absolute horrible price and error that DraftKings did. In terms of guys who I think are guys that we need to pay attention to, specifically in this race, due to the way qualifying is going to work out, because I'm pretty sure they do I need to check and make sure. Let me just check that right quick. I just had to make sure before I started. I'm pretty sure I thought it was the 2 groups, but I just want to be sure before I go on this big old rant. And it's the same thing, but it is going to be huge this week because they're sure, laps led and fast laps are small, but to be honest, those are going to 2 drivers. And to be honest, the majority of those are going to 1 driver. And so fast laps, laps led don't even matter this week. It's all place differential once you get your lap leaders. And so the guys, this is going to be a week where it really shows. The guys starting 11th to 15th, I fully believe 2 of those guys are optimal depending on what their price is, because they are guaranteed probably 6 place differential positions, a top 10 finish, and they got booed out because they were stuck in a bad group, or not a bad group, but we've seen it time and time again this year to the guys. Like you could have a really, really fast car and get knocked out of the top 5 in times just because you happen to have the top 5 best cars in the weekend in that group. You happen to be the 6th. You're starting 11th. So when we're building for this weekend, I'm playing AJ, man. I love AJ. That's just how it's going to be. He's 8,800. I like him as a main lap leader. I think he's going to be there for sure. And so in terms of, for me, looking at where I else want to go, my lineup is pretty open. I'm able to play whoever starts in that range because I'm playing AJ no matter where he starts. I'm going to stop saying it because I've said it like 1,000 times, but he is going to have a top 3 car in this race. The colleague is not going to let him down in terms of strategies. They're not going to let him down in terms of equipment. We've seen how he runs. He's a contender for this race. Okay? It then goes to, do we build a balance line, or do you do AJ and one 10K guy? If we're doing one 10K guy, I like AJ and Elliott, but it's going to be very easy, especially if you're entering like 15 lines. I'd probably do at least 10 with AJ just paired with another 10K guy to try and nail the guy who leads. I really like Chastain, and I really like AJ this weekend. Chastain is going to be there as well. When we look at Chastain's recent races, and certainly I know Sonoma is a slower track, but when it comes to tracks that are identical for Sonoma or looking at Sonoma, it's COTA. They really, really go hand to hand in terms of guys who are going to perform well at Sonoma have performed well at COTA, regardless of what the stage points is, because we're not chasing lap leaders at this point. We're not in discussion talking about who's going to maintain the lead. At this point, we're not too concerned about what the stage strategies come into play. we're looking at guys who are going to be top 5 drivers this weekend. AJ, Chastain are those guys for me. Chuck and Chase Elliott. There you go. Those are your 3 main picks for this weekend that I fully believe in. When we start going to the value range, Todd Gilliland 5,100, this is very interesting that we're slowly getting rid of the 4K range on the salaries here, especially when they go in a more balanced line when you can really play whoever you want. I think Gillen is going to be fine. I really like LaJoy. Buescher is going to be fine as well. I think Buescher is going to be underpriced. I like Keselowski at $6,600. He's been able, road courses, as we've seen with AJ, in bygone years, equipment doesn't matter. It all turns into skill. Keselowski's going to have top 16 in terms of skill this weekend. I like as I said, I like Keselowski. Man, dude, I swear to God, if I gotta fucking talk about McDowell, I'm gonna hate my life. I like Suarez. I like Jones. It's really just nailing the lap leader, man. Whether he's high owned, whether he's loaned, doesn't matter. One guy, whether you're doing projections, I'm doing projections. I always try not to be as aggressive, but when we're looking at this race, I fully believe your main highest scoring guy is probably going to have bare minimum 50 laps led in this race. I think you can go more aggressive, and I think you can easily put him for around 65, 70 laps led in this 110 lap race, and then kind of spread out the remaining laps to maybe 1 or 2 other drivers. But these are the guys I'm looking at this weekend. I've said the guys that I like. I don't see a lot of things in practice changing my mind. Clearly, if it does, we can just talk about it in the live show. But this is the Sonoma preview, and it's that's really it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys in the live show this weekend.